back in that day, they were just 2 and 3 day shows. So you had, you got off work on Friday, you drove Friday night and showed Saturday in every class you wanted to do. And you did the same thing all over again on Sunday. So split combined hadn't even been thought of back then. So it was a little more do-it-yourself kind of thing. Obviously there were trainers, but for folks like us, we just kind of went and did it all.
Bring them in on the rail at a jog, please. On the rail at a jog.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of On the Rail podcast. Today we have a very special guest. We're super excited to introduce this lovely lady. I was trying to think of a joke about the butt end of things, but I couldn't quite think of one. So on that note, I'll let Barb introduce herself. And if you just want to describe your background and kind of what you're doing currently in the industry, we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is Barb Delf. I own Custom Tails, which is a business that manufactures and supplies tail extensions to show horses. And grew up a horse crazy kid, saved my babysitting money and bought my first horse when I was 14, riding down the gravel roads, that sort of thing. Started showing in open shows in the 70s, became involved with AQHA in the 80s, showing quarter horse shows. I was chair of the Iowa Quarter Horse Amateur Committee for a number of years. I was the Iowa Youth Coordinator for 10 years, and then I was IQHA President for 2 years. Still showing, still breeding, still raising horses.
How many mares do you breed a year right now?
Right now, we're just down to, one actually, but we have, through ICSI, we've got frozen embryos. So we try and have a couple of foals every year.
Mm-hmm. And most people probably know this, but for anybody that doesn't, you guys own the great mare, Good Bar's Glamour Girl, correct? And so you get to have the privilege of getting to have a lot of her offspring.
Oh, yeah. She was a phenomenal mare. Right now, unofficially, she is the leading AQHA point-producing mare of all time.
Yeah. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
That's a true accomplishment.
She was amazing.
So do you still show yourself then any right now, Barb?
Yes. After a 15-year hiatus, I am showing a daughter of my old show mare, and it's been exciting and terrifying at the same time because things have changed quite a bit between 15 years ago and now, but it's very, very enjoyable.
I was actually going to ask that, what differences from when you first started showing quarter horse versus now, obviously, can you think of any major differences that you can specify?
Oh, yes. Back in the 70s and 80s, you did a lot of everything yourself. Even at the bigger shows, it was not uncommon to just go and show. You didn't have a trainer necessarily. And more people showed in more events. It was back in that day, they were just 2 and 3 day shows. So you had, you got off work on Friday, you drove Friday night and showed Saturday in every class you wanted to do, and you did the same thing all over again on Sunday. So split combined hadn't even been thought of back then. So it was a little more do-it-yourself kind of thing. Obviously there were trainers, but for folks like us, we just kind of went and did it all.
So what event or events are you going to be showing in this year or coming up?
The mare is predominantly hunt under saddle. She's also cute. So we're doing performance halter, hunt under saddle. I'll add the eck and the horsemanship, and I'm teaching her showmanship as we speak, but that is still a work in progress. So
showmanship's always a work in progress.
Yeah, she's broke. She's already had a show career and points and stuff, but and we showed limited amount this year, but qualified in both halter and hunter saddle for the World Show, which was surprising and fun. So I have some goals.
So what initially got you started in the tail business then?
Purely by accident, actually. AQHA didn't allow tail extensions until 1997. And when they passed that rule, it caught everybody by surprise because they had been pretty stern about being against them. So we were like everyone else and didn't have access to tail extensions because there wasn't anything out there. The only ones available were for saddlebreds, and they were not AQHA legal because they wrap around the tailbone. So I went out to our broodmare band and I cut some hair and I had a glue gun and I had a shoestring and I cobbled one together, and it served its purpose, but it was really, really rough looking. So I kept tweaking a little bit here and there, and it got to the point where the people that we were showing with said, hey, can you make one for me? And I thought, well, sure, that's a way to pay my entry fees and my stall fees. And that's how it started.
So you really are you were at the very beginning of tail extensions.
Yes,
literally.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. How have the show tail trends evolved over the years since you've been doing this?
Well, when I started, for a number of years, a 1 pound tail was considered big. So we did a lot of 1/2 pound and 3/4 pound tails because the big tail look hadn't really come about yet. So I would have to say the evolution of the size of the extension and adding the weight system are the two biggest changes that have happened in the tail extension industry.
Were they blunt cut at the bottom initially, or were they just
Yes,
tapered?
I would say that has always been kind of the trend. Tapered, of course, for the halter horses. And back then, if you were going to add an extension to a lunge line horse, you would go with a tapered tail. They wanted it to still look natural, look like the horse just grew a really nice tail for the lunge liners. But blunt tail extensions have pretty much been the norm right from the get-go.
It's very funny that now when you're looking at all these show horses, it's just there would be no way for you not to have a big tail. Does that make sense? You wouldn't. I don't know. That's just interesting to me to think about how light they used to be and not full.
It would look like unfinished to us these days.
Right.
Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
If you went in the pen now without an extension, you would be the odd man out. And you would be the one that, like Jenna said, wouldn't look like you fit in. It's very much a part of going and showing, just like banding your mane.
Right. People would be like, did you forget something on the back end there? Because you're not ready yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does all of this hair come from? Where are you sourcing all of your hair for us behind the scene folks that are curious?
Well, we buy the tail hair in bulk because we buy it 200 and 300 pounds at a time. And the wholesale company that I purchase from buys tail hair from all around the world. Mexico and Canada, European nations. It then goes back to Asia, which is where my wholesaler is. It's cleaned and sorted there and then shipped to me per my specs. So for me, I ordered in 1 pound bundles. That's easiest for me to work with. But and then whatever lengths I need, and then what colors I need. But they would send it to me in 6 pound bundles if I wanted it. It's just kind of whatever works best for their customer.
Interesting. And do you get those rare colors as well, like the palominos and those one-offs?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have about 5 different shades of white, from palomino white, white with gray, white flaxen, all the way up to silver white.
Oh, wow.
Is there ever a shortage of a color in the hair that you've seen in your time doing this, or is it pretty much available?
I have been very, very fortunate and have not experienced a shortage. When we had to deal with COVID, I had to deal with delays, but I keep a large inventory on hand always. And so I never ran out of anything. I just had to wait longer to get it.
Is there a place where tail hair maybe dyed, or is that frowned upon?
No, it does or can be dyed, and it is dyed. The only dyed tail hair that I carry is what I call ebony, which is the pure blue, black, jet black color. Everything else that I carry are natural shades of hair.
That's interesting. I think I actually have bought an ebony tail from you for my bay hunter under saddle mare. We did a natural black tail on her originally for a few years, and then literally her tail hair is jet black herself with like no extra colors. So I think we did end up buying an ebony tail. And I know that I've already thought about if it was dyed or not. But the cool thing is like we've never seen any color loss in it. So I don't know what you do with your dye process. I'm sure it's your trade secret and whatever, but it's always held true. Really cool.
Right. Well, it's actually their trade secret because I don't even have to mess with that part.
Okay. So
it's
it comes
another
to
color that I ordered. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So Jenna kind of brought it up. She had to buy a tail. Could you walk us through how to buy the tail, like a new tail extension? How do you pick the right color? Because I know some of those redheads out there, they have a wide variety of, more chestnut, more just bright red. How do you find the right color for your horse?
Well, for matching a tail extension, there is a list of things we need to know. And obviously color is the first biggest part of it. Since tail extensions are going to braid in deep inside your horse's free-flowing tail hair, that's the color to match for the most realistic look. So if you're buying something other than natural black or ebony, which are pretty cut and dried, I suggest to the customer that they run their hand down to the bottom of the tailbone. They part that free-flowing tail hair and look inside the free-flowing hair and go with their overall color impression. The tail hair is not monochromatic, so every shade of sorrel we carry or whatever color is going to have highlights and lowlights. So if you take it in hand and micromanage the colors, you're going to drive yourself nuts. So you just have to kind of stand back a little bit and just go with your overall color impression of that innermost tail hair color, because your horse's own hair is going to veil over and around the extension. You're adding that length and fullness and color from the inside out. Now, if you have a horse with a bicolor or a tricolor tail, you can push the envelope to some extent. Say if he's flaxen on the underside and you really like that look, we can build a tail extension that has more flaxen than sorrel because it's already there. We're just enhancing that look. So a lot of times if you want to add a little sparkle, we can do so and still make it look realistic, but you still want it to look like it belongs to the horse. The next thing we need to know is length, and that is determined by the length of your horse's tailbone, not so much the height of the horse. Some horses have long tailbones, some horses have short tailbones. So you will want to take a measurement, and to do so, you'll start your tape measure against the tailbone where you like to attach the extension, and then measure down to however long you want the tail to be, but no longer than the point of the fetlock. Now, on young horses, we like to add a few inches to that measurement to factor in grow room. So as say a 2-year-old, you braid it in up higher on the tailbone, and then as they grow, you just drop it down a little bit to make up for the difference in height. That way you don't have to go out and buy a new tail extension next year when the horse is 2 inches taller.
Good tip.
And then you go on to the amount of hair, which is mostly a matter of personal preference, to some extension based a little bit on the discipline that the horse is showing in. Halter horses are going to wear a lighter weight extension because they want that more natural look versus an all-around horse or Western pleasure horse. Weighted or non-weighted is a a big question, and then attachment style and whether you want it blunt or tapered on the bottom.
So pleasure horses probably wear the biggest tails.
They
on
do.
average, I would assume,
Pleasure
right?
horses and all around horses. And the trend, of course, is for the big tail look. And so pretty much across the board, they're going to wear either 1.5 pound or 2 pound tail.
Yeah, that's a lot
And
of
then
tail.
that's the amount of hair, not so much, if you add a weight system, then you're going to add additional heaviness to the extension.
Do you think you do more weighted tails now than unweighted tails, or is it 50-50, or where's that at right now?
I would say for me, it's probably 50-50 because, we're still doing a lot of halter horses and lunge liners and other breed associations, mules, so I would say for me, it is about 50-50. In the quarter horse industry, in the bigger shows, your higher end exhibitor, more weighted tails than non-weighted.
And what's the different type of attachments that you offer? Or just does it matter like what event or the type of tail hair you're trying to attach it to, or how do you decide what type of attachment you're going to go for?
Most people are interested in whatever is going to be easiest for them, which is understandable. So overwhelmingly, the double loop attachment is the most popular, especially with the weighted tails, because the way you braid them in with the double loop, it's easier to work with the tail extension, the heaviness of the tail extension when you've got a weighted tail. We also offer the horsehair braided ties, which are 2 ties, one on either side. The tube attachment, which is the style that has the hole down the middle. And then we do a lot of one-offs. I mean, we'll do tail plugs if a horse has a tail that's been chewed so short that you can't utilize a traditional tail extension and have it look good. So it's just whatever works for the customer and works best for the horse.
Speaking from personal experience with Barb, I bought several tails over the years from Custom Tails, and I would encourage everybody to just talk with Barb about, what to buy as far as colors and what you can really do. So I've had like 2 instances. I had a almost all white paint mare, and she had an all white tail, and I didn't really want to put just an all white tail on her. Wanted a little more color in there, but obviously not to make it look unnatural. So I talked to Barb, and she ended up making a tail extension that was black hair in the center with white hair that veiled over the top of it. Looked great, tied in. Had another hunter in her saddle futurity mare that she had a little bit of flaxen in her tail, but her tail was mostly kind of that darker red, and wanted to highlight a little bit more of the flaxen. And so we did some trial and error with Barb at a horse show. She was there. And if you can get Barb at a horse show and see her in person, it's even better. And found like the right mix of where we could push the flaxen on her and bring that out and still look completely natural. So it's not just like you got to order the tail as is off the website either. There are a million ways to customize it and really get the exact tail that you want. So just encourage everybody to talk to you and see what kind of magic you can come up with, because obviously you're a wealth of knowledge there.
Well, and those are the fun ones too, when you can do the bicolor tails or the veil tails. It's fun for me because then I get to play around with the colors, and I enjoy that.
Not just another black tail.
Exactly.
So many of those bay horses. What do you think is probably the most unique or toughest tail you've had to create?
The toughest tail extensions, the most challenging, are building a tail extension for horses that have had amputated tails, because there is not a lot to work with. The bone is sometimes very, very short, and that makes the hair very, very short too. So that's probably the hardest ones to work with, and they're not all the same. So you just treat each one as a specialized project and go from there.
What would be the most unique color of tail that you've maybe had to customize for a horse? Is it gray? I mean, I know grays can be different.
I would say the flaxens, where you have a bicolor or a tricolor tail, or a gray fading to silver white. probably the most challenging are when you have a gray horse that they dyed the tail black when he was a dark gray, continued to dye the tail black even as he lightened. And then once he got very, very white, the customer decided to not dye the tail anymore. And so as it's growing out, you have beautiful silver white hair partway down, and then the lower portion is leftover black dye, kind of grubby, faded brown. And so, it's not a natural look, but we need to make an extension that looks pretty and
now
blends.
Looks natural.
Yeah. So I would say that color or color combination is probably the most challenging.
Do you have any pet peeves when it comes to tails on the show pen at all?
I wish people were a little more diligent in washing their tail extensions. And I know a lot of that is due to show schedule. When you start at 7 a.m. and you may not get done until 11 o'clock at night, it's not real high on your list of things to do. And the bigger tails take longer to dry. So, if you wash it at midnight, you run the risk of 7 a.m. It may not be completely dry, but there are a number of times when you can tell that the tail has not seen soap or water for a long time. So, and that makes it hard for us to work with too, as far as, making repairs or reconstruction. So that's probably the thing that irks me the most is dirty tail extensions.
What about when you see a horse that the tail is stuck between its hind legs continuously? Is that too much hair in it typically?
There's a number of reasons. It kind of depends on the horse and the size of the extension, how it was braided in. Dirty tail extensions are going to get caught up between the hind legs more readily than clean ones. If you have a horse that is relatively narrow in back and you've got a big extension, that stride pulls that hair through. It fluffs because it's a big tail, and then as the horse is striding back out, the space between the hind legs isn't wide enough to allow that hair to come back through. You're going to get less hair caught up between the hind legs if you braid your extension in higher on the tailbone rather than right at the bottom of the tailbone or even below the tailbone, because the tailbone then kind of acts like a brake to help impede that flow into the space between the hind legs.
That makes sense. Occasionally I see people that will braid their tail extension on the bottom side of the tailbone. What's your opinion on that? It always seems like it separates to me, like if the horse does move their tail. So
and it will separate because there's nothing there to keep it in place. When you braid on the top side of the tailbone, you can lock your tail extension in place with stabilizer braids. So everywhere the tail extension moves, the tailbone goes, the extension is going to move with it. If it's on the underside, it has nothing to impede that hinge-like effect, because when the tailbone moves, then it's going to, hang down away from the tailbone.
So is there ever a reason, in your opinion, to tie a tail on the bottom side?
No.
Okay.
There certainly may be, but I haven't run across it yet.
Perfectly fair.
In my 20 years almost of showing and doing this, I still have not quite figured out how to get my tail braided in well. I always have somebody look it over and fix it, but can you give any tips maybe on, let's just say the double loops? Like what would be the steps to get that good braid in there so it doesn't slip down?
Well, there's a million ways of putting in a tail extension. My theory is if it's snug against the tailbone and in place with a good tight braid, you're on the right track. I strongly advise utilizing what I call stabilizer braids. So after you've braided your extension in with your main braid through your loops, and backing up just a little bit, it's important that your loops are snug against the tailbone. So if you've started your braid and then you add in your loops and the loops are hanging half an inch or an inch away from the tailbone, that's when it's going to start peeking through the tailbone, or you're going to get some movement. So make sure the loops are snug against the tailbone. And then after you've finished with your loop braid, I like to take a little bit of tail hair from the side of the horse's tail and braid that in with a little bit of hair from the side of the tail extension, just down an inch or so on each side of the extension. So you're locking the tail extension in place, snug against the tailbone. That way, when the tailbone moves, the tail extension has to go with the tailbone. If you braid in only with your loop, you still can separate the tail extension from the horse's tail hair. But if you lock it in place, then you've got it snugged up that way where it's got to follow with the tailbone.
If you're braiding a tailbone for like hunter under saddle, is there anything else you suggest doing or to make it look more cohesive and flow better, or even like the top of it do you tie it in any different, I guess is what I'm asking here?
No, because especially with all around horses that for the Western pleasure, they're going to be just wearing a natural tail, and then, they're switching over to equitation or whatever, and then they're going to have their tail braided. They don't want to be trying to, okay, I have this tail for this event and then this tail for this extension. They're going to want to use the one tail for the one horse. And so I have found that the braiders that braid for AQHA or the stock horse breeds are pretty good at working around the knob type extension. A lot of times they'll just braid down till they reach the top of the extension and then go ahead and just finish off their braid right at the top there. My customers that show predominantly hunter under saddle or over fence usually will purchase a tail extension that is shorter, so they braid it in further down on the tailbone, so they get a longer length of tailbone to put their hunter braid down. But you're still going to braid it in with your double loop. You could probably forego your stabilizer braids because, the hunter braid down the tailbone is going to kind of encapsulate everything, and you won't have to worry about movement.
Here's an off-the-cuff question. Do you sell mini tails to the hunter jumper world? Or the hunter world?
Because we have a style of extension that is made specifically for the hunter jumper world. They are tapered at the top with a single loop, and so they're built so the hunter jumper braiders can braid them over them easily, and they kind of push flat against the tailbone, so you get a more seamless look. I have a fair amount of AQHA or stock horse exhibitors that use them as well. The only drawback to them is you can't utilize a weight system with them. But the hunter jumpers are not as into weighted tails as the stock horse industry is, so that's usually not a factor.
Do those tails have a limit on how much actual tail hair can be in them because the top isn't as big, or can you still put as much?
No, we can still build big tails. The hunter jumper world, they want a pretty tail, but they're not so much into the big tail look. So a pound or a pound and a quarter is probably the most popular sizes that I sell in for the Breeder's Choice style extension. But we offer them in from half pound on up.
So on your pet peeve question that we had earlier, can you tell us how someone should properly care for their tail extension? Maybe the do's and don'ts of, washing and cleaning it, and then what's the process look like after you do that?
Well, my routine is after my day of showing, I take my tail extension out, take it to the wash rack and wash it. Don't submerge it in a bucket of water. Don't get the whole thing wet from top to bottom. Tail hair has wicking action. So if you put that tail extension deep into a bucket of water or drench it thoroughly, the hair is going to wick the moisture up into the top of the tail extension where it's all glued together. Over time, you're going to get tail hair rot because air can't get to that portion, and you're going to lose tail hair. So my suggestion is when you wash, stop about an inch or two below the glued portion of your tail extension. You can use any kind of equine shampoo on your tail extension. You can use human hair care products, but especially shampoo is not made for horse hair. It's made for human hair. So you're going to use more. So in the long run, dollar for dollar, you're probably just as well off using equine shampoo. One thing I do strongly suggest is, depending on your show schedule, every month or so, strip your tail extension hair with dish soap, like Dawn, Palmolive, Ivory Liquid. What happens over time, even though you're washing it on a regular basis, you get product buildup. Shampoo, fly spray, conditioner, show sheen, sweat, arena dust. The shampoo isn't strong enough to cut through all of that. And so it just kind of builds up and builds up and builds up. And so your tail hair can't get really, really clean. Washing in the dish soap takes care of that problem. You may have to wash it 3 or 4 times before the water runs clear, but that is perfectly normal. And when you're done, you're going to be back to squeaky clean hair, and it's going to look lovely. Getting back to my routine, after I've washed the tail extension, I just strip the water out of it, take it back to the tack stall, hang it up, let it dry overnight. In the morning, I put a very small amount of detangler on, brush through, braid it in, and go show. I don't use conditioner that often, maybe after every 7 or 8 shampoos. I suggest staying away from human hair care conditioners because a lot of times they contain a lot of silicone, and then you're right back to that product buildup situation.
Yeah, that I haven't heard the tip of doing like dish soap, and that makes sense because I do tend to get like kind of gummy the bottom over time. So that perfectly makes sense.
The gummy is a perfect description. When it's hard to work a suds up in the tail hair, and even after you've washed it and it's dry and it still has that sticky gummy feel, it's time to strip the tail hair.
Do the dish soap.
Cool. Do the dish soap, absolutely.
Is it true that whoever makes your tail, if there's a one direction the tail hair should go with the I don't know, is it pores of hair or cuticle? You know what I'm talking about. But so if your hair was put in upside down though, then that will be a disaster, right? Is that true?
Yes. Tail hair, the layers of keratin, they all go in one direction, just kind of like, brushing down a piece of corduroy and then trying to brush back up on the piece of corduroy. It needs to be made correctly, because if you make it upside down, then those layers of keratin are going to catch on one another, and it's much more prone to tangling. And especially with a big tail, every time you take it out, you have a big ball of tangled up tail hair. So you want to make sure that, like you say, whoever is building your tail knows that they need to build it with the hair going the right way.
Do you see those very often? They come to you for repairs or fixing?
I see them mostly, repairs or reconstruction, that type of thing.
So
I never would have even thought about that until you brought that up. But it makes sense now that I'm sitting here. I'm like, I never really thought about it that way. That's interesting.
I kind of feel like it'd be like your worst nightmare because I hate tails that are tangly, even, during
There's
the show.
There's not a lot that can be done with them. I mean, if they're relatively new, we can turn them upside down to make them go the right way. But if they have any age to them at all, a lot of that hair has broken off. And so, if we turn it upside down to make it go the right way, you've got a lot of shorter hair and they're going to lose a fair amount of hair in the process.
This actually just triggered an off the wall question for me. I know like in the show clothing, like designer space, we have a lot of like things overseas where, they're selling what looks like a great garment, you know what I mean? But then you get it here and it's not what you think it is. Do we have that in the tail extension industry too? Like,
not to that great a detail. There are a fair amount of China-made extensions that are sold primarily through large retailers, that have everything from A to Z for your horse. But I think it was a little more prevalent back in the day when the 1 pound tails were the bigger tails. I don't see a lot of the big tails being an overseas product. I feel that most of the bigger extensions are being made here in the States. So those, it's just a matter of how well the person building them is putting them together.
Okay, interesting.
Here's another off the wall question real quick that I just thought of. Do people, and I should probably know this just from looking at pictures, but people that show quarter horses or paints or whatever in like Europe, they still use tails, or do you sell quite a few over there? Okay.
Yes, we do a lot of international business. Really, any of the European nations that have an active stock horse show or industry, tail extensions are very much a thing over there as well.
On the subject of repairing these tails that maybe the hair was put in upside down, but what other repair and reconstruction services do you offer? Because I know when you're at shows, you're always busy doing that type of thing too. So
we pretty much will take on anything. The biggest repair is the braided loops. Either they have worn out or they got cut accidentally, or the horse stepped on their tail extension and broke the loops. That is by far the most I don't know, popular isn't the right word, but we repair more loops than anything else. We get a lot of requests to reconstruct a tail so we can add more hair to make it more full, which is very doable. The only drawback is most of the time we're going to have to cut away the top portion where it's all glued together, so we can start with just the hair to add more hair. So that's going to shorten your tail extension. And if you're already braiding very close to the bottom of the tailbone or right at the bottom of the tailbone, reconstruction may not be an option because you'll end up with a tail extension that's too short.
So you can add and remove hair from a existing tail extension, but with the understanding that it will be shorter. Okay, good to know.
Interesting. As we get to wrap things up, is there anything additional or important that you feel people should know about buying a good tail extension or getting one from yourself?
Well, I think you need to make sure that you are purchasing a tail extension from someone that is in the business or has a good reputation. We deal with a fair amount of tail extensions that are kind of do-it-yourself extensions or started out that way and then have lost hair or come apart because they weren't put together well. I would say do your homework. It's not just a matter of picking out an extension and saying, well, that one looks like it might work. As we talked about earlier, there's a fair amount of information necessary to get a good extension. We want it to look like your horse just grew a fabulous tail on their own. So matching the color, doing the measuring, deciding on the fullness is important. And, we offer tails in all different lengths, from 28-inch lunge liners up to 44-inch 18-hand hunters. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So do your homework. Talk to people that know what they're doing.
Is there a difference in the quality of hair you might purchase? Like, so for you that you guys make tail extensions,
I have not.
Hair's not graded or type of thing.
Again, it's who you're buying the hair from. I have been very fortunate. I've been purchasing hair from the same wholesale company. Well, it'll be 25 years next in 2023. And that hair has been good since day one. Horsehair is horsehair is horsehair. And so generally speaking, I'd have to say that the quality is probably the same. I would think that depending on how they processed the hair, meaning, cleaning it and sorting it and stuff, I've seen lesser quality that way. But I'd have to say across the board, the hair that I've worked with has been of the same quality. Again, if you're doing a repair or reconstruction and it hasn't been washed in ages or it's been abused, then yeah, the hair is not going to be great to work with.
And I know you take your trailer to many, many shows throughout the year. So do you have your kind of schedule laid out for 2023 on what shows you might be hitting so people can come and talk to you in person?
Yeah, it'll be pretty much the same. I do about 5 shows a year. The 2 big ones, of course, are NSBA at Tulsa, and then, of course, Quarter Horse Congress. Then they can check the website for the list of shows.
Do you want to provide any other contact information? Maybe give your website, and we'll include it in our show notes too, on how people can get a hold of you, or best way to, if they have questions on buying a tail, what's the best way to get that stuff?
Definitely, they can contact us via email, through our website. The website is www.customtails.com. They can message me. Facebook would be just Barb Delf. Send me a text, give me a phone call. The phone number is 563-381-1394. We like to talk to our customers. We want them to get the best tail extension for their horse. And the more information we have, the better we can fulfill that. And so I'm pretty big on conversations with our customers, because a lot of them do have some questions. And like in your case, Jenna, with the bicolor or the veiled tail, I have questions that I need to ask them regarding how much black versus how much white, or how much flaxen versus how much sorrel. So yeah, give us a call, send us an email, send us a text. We like talking to people.
Yeah, I can personally vouch for all of that. You've been so wonderful to work with over the years, and your mind knows better creatively what can be done with a tail extension, more so than it's kind of like just buying a jacket off the rack versus buying one custom. And it's so, everybody's different on what kind of level of customization they may want, but people do have questions. I strongly encourage them to talk to you and get your feedback and your ideas, maybe, because you're definitely the expert in the matter. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up and remind everybody, Liz, what do we say to like, share, subscribe?
Yep. Leave a review.
That's it. Yeah. So,
yep.
All right, Barb. Well, thank you for your time today. We really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure.
Well, thank you very much, both you and Liz, for asking me on the show. It's a pleasure and an honor, and it's been fun. And happy holidays to both of you.
Thank
you. You too.
As well.
Thanks, ladies.
Thanks.
All right, that'll be your class. Bring them in and line them up.